Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer with you guys. Going to talk about the new moon in Aries that's coming up. And also just looking at a few aspects relative to that new moon and that chart, which I'll bring up shortly. Before I start going into that, and this will come into the presentation and my interpretation of the new moon in Aries. First thing is this: it is without question that we are facing truly historical turning points, right? This period will be remembered for a very long time. We're really facing adversity, and we are really being asked to step up into this with courage, actually, which is the sun ingressing into Aries, the new moon in Aries, Chiron in Aries conjunct the new moon, and squaring the Cancer Capricorn transiting moon's nodes. And I'll unpack some of those themes in a moment. It is an incredibly unsettling time for the entire collective. And it is an experience that is out of our control. It is clearly a pandemic situation, therefore no one is not going to feel anything from it. Everyone's experiencing some level of it. There's a lot of unanswered questions from experts on a number of different streams, in health, in government, in a number of different streams. There's this hysteria that's been born, which is reflected through the panic of the collective unconscious, being all the people on the planet. The self-isolation, social distancing, all these things that have come into play, and there is rapid movement and change with the whole outlook on a daily basis. Every day we are hearing something new relative to whether it's something we need to do or not do, or whether it's further information about this COVID-19, as they call it. Basically, we have entered what I would consider to be a collective crisis that is going to change the world forever as we know it. And any resistance we have towards it is not going to work. There's a number of different ways and, number of different lenses that we can look at this whole picture, and from a bigger picture level as well. There's a lot of conspiracy theories. There's a lot of mainstream information. And then, of course, there's the level which would relate to the collective crisis relative to where the collective has reached in their own evolution, and the necessary processes that are manifesting in order for us to evolve, to wake up, to take a different course of action relative to the way we have been living. And that comes back to the earth herself and the limiting resources because of the abuse and greed of all of humanity relative to the earth and her resources, the overconsumption of things that just comes back to greed, the overproduction in the most cheapest ways, which produce toxins in our food, in our water, on the earth plane itself. All these things eventually have got to catch up with us. You know, the ones that are in power, well, the level of power that I would correlate to the ego, lower self, lower stream of action is merely that of greed. So that the driving, motivating force is about greed through producing more and more and more, which actually in truth is less in terms of quality, of course. So, you know, I mean, we could talk about this for hours, and I don't want to talk about this for hours, but I'm just introducing it before I talk about the new moon, because it is all relevant, because it is a collective experience. We're all in it. Over, you know, decades or hundreds of years, and we can even go as far as thousands of years of patriarchal systems that speaks to a number of different things and levels and structures. And then, of course, within that is, as I've already mentioned, the sheer greed of the ego, the insatiable lower self that just wants more and more and more, which has resulted in the productions that we see, which are so toxic and artificial, has meant that we've moved further away from soul life, spiritual life, heart-centered life, moved away from the centers connecting to the heart, which connects to nature, nurture, and the split and the crisis is because there's the energy of the collective, you know, it's being transmitted in the left brain. So there's this overstimulus of the left brain and the greed of just the insatiable position of more, you know, I want more, and losing touch with nature, the simplicity, the cleanliness, the basics. And it's interesting, you know, Uranus is transiting Taurus, hasn't been there for, you know, 84 years. It's come back 84 years later, and there's so many components astrologically from a collective level that is speaking to this pandemic. It's Neptune in Pisces, it's Uranus in Taurus, it's the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, and then, of course, Jupiter and Mars that has been in Capricorn transiting around this Pluto-Saturn conjunction as well. That's just added to the expansion of this pandemic that we are all experiencing in some way, shape, or form. So what I'm really getting at, without talk, because we can talk about this for hours, there's so many opinions, there's so many layers, there's so many perspectives, and I just want to bring it back to this one point, and that is that this imbalance that has evolved over thousands of years really has just reached a climax point, and the scales need to tip on the other side now. So we are experiencing the consequences and ramifications of our own doing anyway. There's no power in dividing and in blaming and in projecting, because all that does is separate us even further from coming to a position of alignment, correct alignment with soul personality individually, and then the collective soul with the collective personality, right? If we can't bring those together and work together in unison, the division is going to, it's definitely going to make this journey a lot more difficult. The truth of the matter is that given the consensus reality of this 3D dimension is predominantly 80% of the population. So there is going to be a struggle and a challenge for people to really come on board with what needs to be given birth to. That the new sort of paradigm, if you like, or the new way of life, the new path, the evolution of the collective unconscious and our own individual evolution, that's what is going on here. And it's just simply that in all of humanity, if you go back into history, this is not the first time that we are facing, an infectious disease that's contagious. We've had world wars, we've had other infectious diseases come along. When AIDS came out, which was in the 80s, there was a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. World War I, there was a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So this is showing us historically, from a collective point of view, what the Saturn-Pluto conjunction can bring into our sphere of experience. The Saturn-Pluto conjunction and the energy of Saturn-Pluto, it's doing is mirroring and reflecting the vibration of the collective. And that has so many layers to it, because it has the individual unconscious component within each individual, and then there's the collective unconscious and everything within that in terms of our feelings, our actions, our thoughts, our way of life. So Saturn-Pluto is without question, and I've said this many, many times. In the last couple of years, I've said this many times in terms of my YouTube videos. I've known this forever, since I started astrology. Saturn-Pluto is, without question, the most difficult cosmic energy that we are dealing with every time it comes up. And those of you born with that in your natal chart, you have that as a lifetime theme. So the cosmic forces, whilst they have their inherent archetypal signatures and descriptions, they will essentially reflect what's going on in the collective unconscious. As above, so below. So we're in a time in history where we have entered a time and space where the only way through this is, or the most powerful way through this, is through unison, not division, through courage, not blame, anger and projection. I mean, in Australia, I'm really mortified by the behaviour of Australians in terms of, it's quite fascinating to me, actually. I read that in the US, there's been an expansion of gun sale and ammunition for guns. There's been hundreds of people queuing up at shops that sell guns, buying guns, right? I mean, that's, in my opinion, that's not going to potentially result into a good situation. On the other hand, here in Australia, we have people lining up for toilet paper and getting into physical altercations and fights for toilet paper in supermarkets. They've actually brought police into supermarkets to control who gets how much toilet paper, and it's complete madness. And this is, look, I mean, I have to say, though, that it is also a result of what's being transmitted through the media, right? Which, it has created this collective chaos and fear, Saturn, Pluto. And because of how out of touch people are with the soul, and they're just operating from this very surface level, personality level, that, the media says, this is what you need to do, this is what's happening, and 80% of the people just run and follow it. This is what happens when we're living at the personality level. So I do blame the media, although I don't like to blame, as I said, we don't need to blame, but so blaming doesn't really have an effective result. But I'm just very aware of what the media is pumping into the psyche, into the collective unconscious of everyone. So I can understand people's concerns and fears and so forth. But it's important to understand that Neptune in Pisces is the collective unconscious. It's everyone's feelings and thoughts, unconscious things, all just coming up through that ocean and through Neptune at the moment in Pisces, which is creating the confusion and the deception, because there is a lot of deception in so many ways, relative to the information that we are told, relative to information that people decide to put out there themselves who are not even qualified to speak on certain subjects, relative to internet scammers who are using this pandemic situation to steal people's money. And I mean, it's really chaotic. And before I was saying that the more conscious way we can understand this collective experience is to understand that through all the years where the earth has been more or less raped of her resources, she has arrived at a point where she's just saying enough is enough. We cannot sustain what we have been doing. It absolutely has to change. So, I mean, there's been, reports of in Italy, the Venice canals, the waters have cleared to such an extent that there are dolphins appearing. That's pretty incredible, right? And that's just a result of, the lack of movement, which means, no traffic, no cars, no, all this, the way that we just sort of function more or less on a day-to-day basis. But it's an overactive ego out there, just with all the things that we do that compromise our health and that damage the earth as well. So all of that has been restricted and reduced because of the forced confinement. And people are irate about that. And I completely understand. See, the thing is this, there's a lot of people on this planet that are very active, very extrovert. Their way of life is so external. And that is probably largely most of the people on the planet. So, and men especially, because men by their very nature, the masculine energy is, its inherent expression is to take action, to act on things. So people who are more inclined to be active and their life is very much lived from that external level, this confinement is like, it's imprisonment. So people are very angry and cannot understand the process on any level. And this, I mean, the good things that are happening with this is that, first and foremost, the confinement and self-isolation and things, it's really an opportunity to learn how to be present. There's a lot of people that wouldn't even know what that means and that wouldn't even care. But the fact that this is being forced on us, as it were, collectively, is a pretty damn strong indication that this is something that we have to learn, because of how much we have taken ourselves out into the external and just lost complete connection with the heart center, with being present, with being still. So this confinement is throwing people back on their feet to be with themselves and to also be with the people they have relationships with. It's incredibly challenging when you have two people living in a home whose way of life is they both work full time, which would largely mean that they only see each other in the morning for a brief time and then in the evening. And that can be a powerful recipe for relationships to work. So what I'm saying is that this confinement and isolation is going to confront us with a lot of matters that we haven't worked through. One being the ability to be present and not try to control things, to let go of control and to surrender to a certain extent to the moment. It's going to force us to look at the relationship we have with ourselves when we are in our own space, especially if we are used to just being busy all the time, out there, active. It's going to force us to work on our personal relationships that are in our immediate environment, if we live with other people especially. So there's so much growth and so many challenges that are going to come through this experience, even just from that level, excluding for a moment the component of the virus that is threatening to life, right? I understand that's a whole other level altogether. I'm just touching on the levels that correlates to what's been imposed on us without our will. You know, our will is opposing it. We don't want that. We want to feel free and just do whatever it is we do, but at the moment we can't. So there's this sense of autonomy. Our autonomy and our freedom feels like it's being compromised and or completely taken away. There's that level. Then there's the level of the fear of contracting this virus and the fear of the fact that there's no vaccine for it at the moment. You know, there's all these fears circulating in the collective. And then there's a lot of facts as well. And it's very difficult at the moment to discern what's true and what's factual. And that, again, throws us back to having to have to be present and just taking one moment at a time, one day at a time. That's very difficult to do for people who are very active, very busy, and like to have that sense of control. And just think about it, the whole freaking world, yeah, I said freaking, the whole freaking world is facing this same issue. No one's exempt. So the new moon that's coming up. Well, first of all, let's just talk about the sun ingressing. Actually, before I go there, just a couple more final little positive notes in terms of what we're facing, which is still completely uncertain and unknown on a number of different levels. But what is happening that is evident is that even though there has been this aggression, opposition, resistance, fear, all that stuff, that's still there. But there's also a lot of people coming together, people offering their time, like I am right now with you guys, offering their service in whatever medium that may be. Then there's other things like in communities and in families, people offering to help another person, to go shopping for them. These are small things, but they are huge things, because it is these things that bring us closer together to the experience of compassion and love and caring, really caring, giving a shit about your neighbor who maybe just for whatever reason can't go out, whatever it is. These are all little things that are super important. Bringing us back to basics. Our actual survival is being, hugely threatened. Uranus in Taurus. Taurus is about what? It's about our primary survival. What does Uranus correlate to, apart from the obvious things that we know? It correlates to bringing shock and unexpected matters pertaining to the archetype that it's working through. Taurus, survival, getting back to basics. Our absolute basics are being threatened. We've ran out of absolute basics. Food. If I go to the supermarket now, 80% of the shelves are still empty. We're talking basics here: food, water, toilet paper. This is Uranus in Taurus. Neptune in Pisces is the hysteria, the panic, the confusion, and the deception. The Saturn Pluto is the virus itself. So here's a couple of interesting facts. The coronavirus allegedly broke out in China. It was around about late December 2019. So realistically, that's just 3 months ago, right? Not even. On the 17th of February, Mars ingressed into Capricorn, right? Jupiter was already in Capricorn, Saturn in Capricorn, Pluto in Capricorn. Disease or infection, contagious infection, correlates to Mars and Pluto. Viruses correlate to Pluto. Bacteria correlates to Pluto. Blood in general correlates to Jupiter and Sag, Leo, and Aquarius. Why am I pointing this out? I'm pointing this out because the buildup of Saturn, Pluto, Mars, Jupiter, that stellium, that quadruple conjunction that occurred in Capricorn is the buildup of this coronavirus having the outbreak that it's had. And now it's obviously pandemic, right? It's collective, it's worldwide. But you can see the correlation just with the planets and the planets in the signs that they're in as well. And disease festering correlates to Saturn. So here we have everything to do with this virus, disease, connects to the Pluto, the Saturn, the Mars, and the Jupiter, all in Capricorn. It's all there. They're just some facts, right? So The sun is ingressing into Aries in a couple of days' time. And that's a really important brand new solar cycle. It's the sun moving into 0 degrees of Aries. It's the vernal equinox. It's the true new year, at least the astrological new year, which is the true new year. Okay? The man-made calendar, which tells us that new year is, 1st of January, that's not true. It is 0 degrees of Aries relative to the tropical zodiac, which correlates to, the vernal equinox and the solstices and so forth. Those seasons is what makes up the tropical system, tropical zodiac, the astrological tropical system that we use, that I'm discussing today. And Aries is always, doesn't matter what system you use, Aries is always the archetype that correlates to birth and new beginnings, period. So whilst we're in the midst of this adversity with extreme uncertainty and a lot of fear, and we still haven't even hit the peak of it, really, especially here in Australia. We're not locked down here. I heard yesterday that Australia have locked their borders, so no one can fly into Australia who's not a resident, right? And we can't fly out, or we've been advised not to. I'm not sure if we legally can't. I think we can, but I think we've been strongly advised not to. But no one can enter this country. So it's slowly starting to, day by day, we have more restrictions coming through. And that's literally been a rapid increase literally on a daily basis. Never seen anything change as much as it is so quickly on a day-to-day basis. It's really just unbelievable. And I know this is happening everywhere in every country. We know that Italy has been in lockdown for quite some time, the whole country. One thing I loved that I saw, apart from the dolphins and the Venice canals, being purified, which is the earth preparing herself. She's resetting herself. The whole earth is resetting. In terms of ascension, it is the earth ascending to the next level. And we will have to follow. Kicking or screaming, resisting, liking or not liking, we have to follow because the earth is leading it. So I saw that the Italians, which is just it's so beautiful. It made me very emotional and very happy, an emotion that was filled with joy rather than sadness. And it was just the Italians just singing. They're on their balconies and they're just singing, playing instruments, dancing, singing. See, that's a reflection of the resilience that we have spiritually, especially on a collective level. We will get through this. We have gotten through many pandemics before, world wars. So it's not that we haven't been through something like this before. It may be the case that some of us who were born into this life, who were born in the 80s, 70s, 90s, didn't experience war, didn't experience transmitting AIDS and so on and so forth. So we're in a fairly unique position from that level because all of us on the planet now are subject to possibly transmitting this virus. Now, there are some facts and information around that relative to, infants, children, teenagers and young adults. And even when I say young adults, it's even like people in their 20s, they're likely not to transmit it. The more vulnerable people are the elderly, as it's being said. I'm not saying this is my information. I'm just saying what's being said. And or persons who have underlying compromising health ailments that might make them more susceptible and vulnerable to this virus, right? So even though technically everyone's, susceptible to it, there are a lot of people that are not going to catch it. That they're just not going to transmit it. Anyway, there's still a lot of unknowns and uncertainties with that. But the point is this as well: regardless of what is going on, the fact is it is going on. So we can't deny it. We can't resist it. There's no point getting angry at it. We just have to come to some understanding and some recognition of what this could imply from a collective, universal level, and then what it brings back to the awareness and attention of ourself and our own life and our ability to be present, our personal relationship to ourself. Being confined, being isolated is, as I said before, for most people, that's going to be really difficult. For the introverts, people who like to hang out at home, it's going to be less difficult from that level at least. Now, look, let's just have a look at the chart, okay? And I'll just make some comments about the new moon. So as I was saying with the, oh, hang on, I haven't shared my screen. Sorry, guys. Let me just share my screen. So the sun ingressing into Aries, that's what I was saying, and I kind of got sidetracked, which is happening in a couple of days' time, is, in my view and in my sense of things at the moment with what's happening on a collective level, is just, it's really just it's a mirror of the absolute, unquestionable process of a new beginning that has to come because of what we are facing. And, Aries is the archetype of showing courage. It's the warrior, it's being able to rise in the midst of, the greatest challenges. One of the archetypal heroes that correlates to Aries was Achilles. Achilles, who's my father's name, who's tattooed on my wrist there. That's why I had to breathe for a second there. But Achilles, faced every single challenge that was presented to him with no resistance, no fear, no hesitation. This is what we kind of have to tap into here. On one level, with what we are faced with, Sun in Aries, we have to tap into that inner warrior, that inner hero that has that tremendous courage. We have to absolutely draw that out because we have to show courage right now. It's not about collapsing and falling into the corner, into a dark hole. It's about showing courage. The courage is going to take us through the new journey of the sun, starting his solar journey through the entire zodiac, starting from the 21st of March, right? That's why it's the new year, the astrological new year. Now, the new moon in Aries, I'll just back up. With Achilles, we all know that Achilles had one vulnerable spot in his body, which was his heel, hence the term that we hear, my Achilles heel is blah, blah, etc. So that, in the context of what I was saying, is also showing us that whilst we absolutely have to be courageous through these incredibly challenging times, which are challenging us mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, we have to show courage, be courageous, and also accept that we have vulnerabilities as well. It's not, I'm not suggesting that it's about ignoring our vulnerabilities, because vulnerabilities too have strengths, incredible strengths actually. You know, in the human form, being born into this human vessel, into this physical body, we are all vulnerable, whether we like it or not. Just the fact that we are born into this human body. Why? Because we are subject to illness and death, decay. You know, when we're not invincible, even though we feel that and think that when we're quite young, but we're not. We're all, we all grow old, we all age, we all die, we all have different, you know, that's just a fact. That's that's the human condition and our vulnerable side. It's inevitable, right? So we you know, we have to get into that courage with the acceptance of any vulnerabilities that show up. And why does that speak even more through this new moon? Because Chiron is there in Aries. And Chiron in Aries is absolutely, without question, our vulnerability and fears around being able to be courageous, to assert ourself, our own personal identity, to be courageous enough to step into that. Now, the new moon in Aries is taking place on the 24th of March in the Southern Hemisphere, and for most of you guys, it will be on the 23rd of March. And this is a very telling new moon relative to what we are facing at the moment, on one level. On another level, there are many unknowns about this new moon, as there are about every new moon. Because a new moon means that the sun and moon have come together. It's a new phase. A new phase means that there are unlimited possibilities contained within that frequency, within that new phase, that new energy. What we can take is the quality of Aries, the Aries archetype, and understand that this cycle, this lunation cycle, is beginning with the emergence of having to show courage at a time where people are shitting themselves. And I can completely understand it. But this is what this new moon is saying. We have to step into courage and strength and not give up and not give in. So the new phase, as I said, it contains all possibilities. So we don't know exactly what will be born out of this cycle, but we can absolutely, without question, plant the intentions for the earth, actually, for the world, and of course for ourselves as well, individually. So obviously you need to have a look at where this new moon lands in your birth chart so that you can tune into that part of your chart, meaning that area of life. That's where it's going to begin a new cycle, a new process for you. That's relative to your own birth chart. And then the new moon in Aries on a collective level is what I said. It's the beginning of a new cycle, a new journey that's not only going to see us necessarily just through this month or the next 4 weeks, you know, new moon until the next new moon is about 4 weeks' time, right? Because That's one layer, but the other layer is the sun in Aries, a whole brand new solar cycle that will see us through the next 12 months. So in other words, what we intend now, what we act towards now, what we understand now is going to speak for the next 12 months to some degree. And that's even more important because of what we are facing at the moment on a collective level, right? So the conjunction to Chiron is definitely going to be felt. On the one hand, it's going to be felt as that experience of our inability to feel a sense of autonomy and freedom because of the restrictions that are being imposed on us. And the way through that, in my opinion, the way through that and the way to handle that is to show the courage that you need to show from a personal level in your own personal space relative to showing up and being present in your own life, in your own home, with whatever it is you have access to. Reminding us to be present, to show courage in this journey that we're going through, because it's a journey, but it's a pretty damn significant one that's going to impact the whole world forever, right? So the Chiron it's going to stimulate and trigger, more of those feelings. The Chiron, connects to the wounds that we experience or hold within us, and also where we might feel a sense of rejection, feeling rejected in some kind of way. And here in Aries, it's see, on the other hand, we can also look at it and understand it, which is the more elevated way, is that this new moon being conjunct Chiron in Aries is saying that not only do we have to step into courage, Aries, we also have to find a way to heal Chiron through this incredible journey that we are all going through, where we still don't know where it's going to end and how it's going to end. And that's when you've got to show up with courage, when you don't have the answers and you don't have the certainty and you don't have the control. Because if you've got all the answers and, you've got the control, as it were, then, well, where's the courage in that? You don't need courage with that because you've got it all there. The courage is asked for you to show it, right? In the midst of adversity and uncertainty, that's where you've got to show your courage. That's true courage, to bring that up, bring that inside you, activate it, allow it to breathe you, as it were, through the most difficult times that we are all facing. So we can tune into Chiron from that level of feeling wounded because our autonomy and freedom is compromised and or taken away, and we can resonate with that stream, that line. Yes, there is truth to that. I'm not saying there isn't, but your response to that is what's either going to keep you imprisoned or allowing you to tuning in more into a sense of freedom, however you can find freedom within these confined circumstances and situations. What about people that are incarcerated and are in prison? There's many people that have been incarcerated who have found freedom within their own self through the journey that they have gone through on a deep, psychological, emotional, spiritual journey whilst being confined in this little space. How many people have done that in all the years that we've had these systems in play? Think about that. At least we are confined in the comfort of our own home. We have access to a number of different things. And again, it's going to bring us back to that space of having to have to be present and letting go and trusting. Now, the the new moon and Chiron is square the nodes. So let's just unpack that a little bit. It's pretty telling, in my opinion, and it's pretty obvious, actually. It's just simply highlighting, first of all, it's highlighting this frustration that we have and resistance we have towards the imposed limitations and restrictions, which is inevitable because it's Saturn Pluto. Saturn Pluto is restrictions on a collective basis, be it financial, be it in movement, be it in food. It's in all levels, and that's what we are experiencing collectively. So it's you can't deny it, you can't stop it, you can only try and work with it. So Chiron squaring the nodes and this new moon squaring the nodes is showing us that this collective experience of the transiting South Node in Capricorn is highlighting the deconstruction of old paradigms and old realities. Because this virus on a much bigger picture level is just going to be, there's going to be many things, but one thing it's going to be is the result of having to have to live in a very different way to what we're used to, Capricorn South Node. The North Node in Cancer is the component that's being activated at the moment, even though it's not the bigger activation at the moment, but it will get there, is the component where people are reaching out more to care for one another and share and connect and take care and nurture and so connecting to the heart, compassion, love, care, nurturance, the emotions, the heart. Capricorn will want to take direction and rule from the head. But Cancer, North Node, which is the collective direction we are going in relative to the moon's nodes, we have to activate our heart center. And this situation is forcing us to do that in one way or another. So that's what this new moon is holding in its frequency as it is born. And because it's square the nodes, it's going to highlight the conflict that we will see on a collective level, where many will be trying to hang on to the Saturn reality and structure, which seems to give people a sense of safety or security or certainty, because it's the being familiar with the current structures, and not only current but structures that have been in place for thousands of years. And so letting go of that is very hard for a lot of people. So that's going to be the struggle and the conflict relative to this new moon, because it's squaring the nodes. And then there's going to be another portion of people that are just going to be able to embrace the North Node in Cancer. And the Chiron squaring all this is going to amp all this up and emphasize it even more. And also, the Chiron is quite fascinating, because I even got a message this morning from a lady who had a reading from me some time ago, but she also works in a field that involves working with different healing modalities, right? And she sent me a message this morning and asked me if I could contact whoever I thought might be interested in. She wants to try and promote other people's businesses, so people who are working for themselves, and I'm one of them, because there's this there's going to be a financial shortage, right, collectively, and that's already begun with a lot of people losing their jobs. So there's ripple effects on a number of different layers and levels. And I'm not playing that down as if it's nothing. That's going to be huge without question. But again, that's not going to kill us. So we need to get perspective, and we need to, become more creative with our thinking, and we need to improvise. That's just what we have to do. So we can either do that or we can either not. And that's going to be the decider on largely how you're going to experience probably the next few years, really, to a certain extent. I think what's happening at the moment, the more positive sort of transition and shift, if you like, we won't really see that, not in the early stages. And that can be, that's the difficult thing, because that can influence people's perception into fear mode, which is not the reality of the bigger picture. We need to monitor this in our own self, first and foremost, in our own self. Because that is what's going to be projected out there, and therefore be our collective experience. Anyway, this lady was just wanting to promote people's work, especially people who work for themselves and might struggle financially, over the next 6 to 12 months, right? So that's just an example of a soul who she's resonating with that North Node in Cancer and the Chiron coming up to this new moon, right, squaring the nodes. So these are the ways that we can understand these frequencies. These are the ways we can step into these energies and work with them, regardless of what appears to be an incredibly overwhelming, overpowering force and limitation. It's going to come back to your perception and your thoughts on things. And we can, but it would be better not to overthink it. By overthinking the uncertainties, that's just a little breeding nest for fear. That's all that is. So again, it comes back to coming back to the present moment, improvising, working within the constraints and limitations to the best of your ability, opening your heart, opening your soul, offering compassion, sensitivity, care, nurturance to yourself and to everyone around you and to people all around the world. There's much more power in the vibration of love than there is in the vibration of fear relative to evolution, individuation, unison, development, healing, growing. If we operate from a festering fear vibration, we're just, very simply, we're just going to experience the ramifications of that, the fear. So it is important how we all perceive this and our thoughts about it and our feelings about it. That actually does have a lot of influence on the collective unconscious, and therefore what will be spat out, if you like, from all of us in terms of what we will see. So we can fall into the fear and the anguish and the angst, and we can let that rule, or we can rise above Aries, show courage, and troop on as best as we can, and channel the North Node in Cancer, heart, center. Move away from the old paradigms of the way we think things should or need to be. Understand that there is a divine plan in play that's leading us. That's the evolution of the earth. So, just one other thing as well, which is really beautiful, is that if you look at this new moon, it's spectacular. It's right at the midpoint of Uranus and Mercury. That new moon, 4 degrees of Aries, you can check this out yourself, or if you're good at maths, you'll be able to work it out right now. The midpoint between 4 degrees of Taurus and 6 degrees of Pisces is 4 degrees of Aries. So in other words, this new moon is being held within the frequency of Mercury and Uranus, which is what? This is what it's going to be. It's going to be a new birthing of ideas that are just going to be so radical, so futuristic, and it's going to be a collective sharing, right? There's going to be new innovative systems of thought that are going to be born during this new moon cycle that are going to be absolutely necessary for this process that we are all going through. And we're very lucky that Uranus and Mercury are there holding this new moon in a sextile aspect. That's a beautiful signature and potential manifestation of incredible thinking that will be born, that will be very powerful and necessary for what we are going through individually and collectively. And that's something we can also activate within our own self. If we are working with new moons, which I know a lot of you are, you have your own little practices and rituals and things that you do. You set your intentions, you may have a meditation. I highly recommend any of those things and much more as well. Because first of all, you're aligning something very clear within your own self, and that alignment does actually have impact and influence on the world, on the collective unconscious, on the ether, on the soul, the etheric body, the astral body, our own and others, and the earth's herself. So it all impacts all of it. The thing to always remember is if we reside with the notion that, oh, well, what's the point? You know, most people are thinking like this. So what's the point of me having this, you know, this particular intention that's totally beautiful, that's totally pure or whatever? If this is what gets us back to that very limited, fear-based way of operating in terms of our thinking. So no pure thought or feeling goes unnoticed by the divine. That's the first thing. And no pure feeling or thought or act towards another or towards the earth goes unnoticed or has no impact at all. We impact people in ways that we are just completely unaware of and oblivious to. The energetic exchange that goes on collectively and then individually, that energetic exchange is a lot more powerful than what we realize and what our physical eyes can see. So we need to really just remember that and stay really connected with that understanding to support and facilitate the processes of what we're going through now, so that we can bring about more upliftment, answers, direction, new reality, new earth, new paradigm, new ways of living, new understandings, new insights. That's all held. That's going to expand because Saturn's gone into Aquarius. That's going to bring about a whole bunch of things, which I've spoken about Saturn in Aquarius in another video, so I don't want to unpack that now. So have a look at that video if you haven't seen it. And, you know, Saturn in Aquarius, which is ingressed into Aquarius here, you can see it, 0 degrees, 9 minutes, okay? So it ingressed, I think, the day before it was. So here we have a new moon with Saturn in Aquarius. That's a whole new cycle unto itself. That also means that Saturn, the reality, it's got to now be channeled and filtered through the Aquarian archetype over the next 3 years. And whilst that has, Saturn always has his downside, his restrictions, his fears, his limitations, all that stuff, right? It is also about new development as well and new growth. It's not all gloom and doom. Or yeah, gloom and doom. And Saturn is in Aquarius is the prelude to this year of this year Saturn's only going to be in Aquarius for 3 months. Anyway, watch the other video because I've spoken about all this. But really all I was alluding to there was that we have this new moon conjunct Chiron, square the nodes at the midpoint of Uranus and Mercury, and then we have Saturn that's ingressed into Aquarius. So there's lots of brand new energy in this cycle beginning on the 23rd, 24th of March on a number of different levels. So those are some of my reflections and thoughts about this new moon in Aries. And, as I said, Mars, Pluto, Jupiter, they all correlate to disease, virus, bacteria, infectious, contagious diseases, blood. Pretty interesting. Certainly not coincidental, is it? Hardly likely. Okay. Just want to check that I've pretty much covered my thoughts. Yeah. So I'll leave that with you guys, and it's a bit to take in and to consider. Please feel free to share your feelings and thoughts and comments below, and just let me know how you're doing as well. Let me know where you are, what location you're at. I'm very interested to know how people are doing, and I think it's really important for us now to be able to share and connect. Yes, of course, we're going to have different opinions and different perspectives on certain things, but I'm not asking for debates and arguments. I'm just asking for people to share their personal sort of experience of where they're at the moment. And just obviously we all need to be respectful of each other and where we are all at, because we are all having our own personal experience with this. And then, of course, we're having the collective experience as well. But I'd love to hear about how you're doing and how you're coping with everything. And, if this video has given you, some new ways of maybe just thinking about things or reflecting, and, what you can do with this new moon energy as well, because it is an incredibly powerful new moon leading the path. Aries are natural born leaders. You can't stop an Aries from doing anything. So it's quite extraordinary, actually, when you think about that from a large picture view, which would be to say that we're coming out of Pisces, the sun in Pisces. So we are closing something. We are finishing something so crucial to the Earth's evolution. And our left brain doesn't get that, because our left brain just wants to think about, why are there no answers? Why isn't there enough food? Why isn't there enough medicine? Why? And I do understand that. But I'm just saying, like, from a bigger level, which requires right brain, you've got to go into your right brain intuition. You can't think about the bigger picture and the deeper implications that will not be seen for a long time. If you try to relate to that from your left brain, it's not going to happen. The left brain is just going to keep bringing up all the wrongs of what's missing, what's not right, what's not happening, what shouldn't be happening, all of that. But if we can somehow activate the intuition, trust the divine process, that's the most important. Trusting the divine process, intention. So we've completed something really huge with the sun in Pisces relative to this collective pandemic. And the sun is going to go into Aries, and it's new life. It's a new way. It's a new journey. It's a new earth. It's a new path. It's a new direction. It's a new paradigm. Understand that. Right. Okay. See you guys soon with something else. There's much more to talk about, but I really just wanted to talk about the new moon, and more specifically relative to the current collective conditions and where we are all at with that. So sending you all much love and blessings as always, and even more so now at times like this. And I just wanted to also say that you may be in a position right now where you may want to have like a quick session with me, 30-minute session, 45-minute session. I don't normally do that, but I'm going to open that up for people who might just want to talk about some anxiety that they're feeling, some, whatever it is, you might just want to have that interaction with an individual, myself, who has an astrological and psychological therapeutic background, right? So we don't have to do a whole chart reading. We can just work on something that's really concerning for you at the moment. I'm very open and flexible to that, because I think that's going to be a necessity, especially for this year. Okay. And so I too will find myself needing to adjust according to what's changing as well. So that's why I'm putting this out there, just letting you know that I'm here if you want to, just have some quick sessions, or whatever it may be. Okay. All right. See you guys soon. Look after yourselves, and be strong, Aries, the warrior. Just have courage. It will be okay. We'll be okay.